the Princess Issa. In myth, she was called the Redeemer. It was said this child would stop the madness of war. That she was to usher in a new age of peace and compassion. I was given memories of a world I will never see. Loyalty to a king I cannot serve. And love for a child I could not save.
What do you think they want?
Everything.
I found her. A star before her.
Are you a child of war? I was taught that love is weakness. There is a difference between justice and revenge.
There is a price to pay for your defiance. Shh. One moment. I do love this part.
Hold on.
I don't want no trouble.
We're not here to bring any.
Are you ready? You and I both know fear. Let's show them that we're not afraid. Let's show them we're more than the shackles that bind us.
A king is a man, and a man can fail. But a myth is indestructible.
The time has come for all that you love. Protect each other and show them no mercy.
Who among you is willing to die for what you believe?
Let's go! That was absolutely epic. Now that's a movie trailer and that's just a teaser. Insane. Imagine how long the actual real second trailer is going to be. Should we talk about it? Let's go. Well, believe it or not, that was Zack Snyder's teaser trailer for Rebel Moon. Over 3 minutes of glorious footage. I mean, I've been excited about this. I never doubt Zack Snyder. I knew the Snyder Cut was going to be beyond my wildest dreams. I knew Man of Steel was going to be great from the trailers. I knew BVS would be great. When he does something, you know, even the zombie stuff on Netflix and all of that, which is, I suppose, if you like, midder, the normal Snyder stuff, is still great to watch, but not the most memorable Snyder material. This is the work of his life. This was his pitch for Star Wars. I'm hearing people saying, it's too like Star Wars. It was supposed to be a pitch for Star Wars. That's why other people saying it's similar to the Dune movie. Listen, it's an auteur's epic fantasy movie, so it's going to look similar to other fantasy movies. But this is something very different. This is set in outer space, and I'm very, very excited about it. Did you see those kind of lightsabers that are not lightsabers? Wow. Because Disney Star Wars never really overflowed the footage with lightsabers. Lightsabers is one of the most exciting things that George Lucas introduced to the Star Wars universe, and we barely see it. Maybe it's against their politics. I don't know what, but yeah, we're going to see some proper saber fighting in this movie. What I saw in this trailer was beautiful cinematography, choreography, the cast. You know, if you want a virtue signal about, a diverse cast, then this is it. The cast look amazing. They're strong actors. The music's great, yes. Tom Holkenborg, aka Junkie XL, of course he's doing the music. He did the music with Hans Zimmer for BVS. He did the whole 4 hours of the Snyder Cut as well. The man is a genius and was trained by Hans Zimmer. And, you know, Zack Snyder never lets you down. He's going to make you an epic movie with an epic score, epic choreography, epic cinematography, and it's amazing. If you're looking for one of those shot by shots, I don't have the editing software to do it. I mean, once I've seen something, I forget it straight away. But I've got you, because we're going to read a little article, because Zack Snyder did a lot of talking after this trailer was screened. Rebel Moon is meant to be Zack Snyder's Star Wars and ultimate vindication. Basically, right, listen to me, Rebel Moon is exactly what The Force Awakens, The Last Jedi, and, you know, The Last Skywalker should have been. Is it The Last Skywalker? Who cares? But this is what it should be. Something new, a new direction. This is exactly the pitch he had for Star Wars. He's redefined it a little bit because it's not Star Wars. This is what he did with Man of Steel. He redefined Superman for a modern era, as did, you know, Christopher Nolan and David S. Goyer as well. Snyder and his partners discussed the project's origins and how it found its own footing. From the moment Zack Snyder's ambitious Netflix space opera Rebel Moon was first announced, one aspect of its backstory has earned more attention than anything else. The film began as a Star Wars pitch. I remember calling Zack at some point 15 years ago, producer Eric Newman said, at a splashy Hollywood Hills preview event for the film. Newman previously worked with Snyder on Dawn of the Dead. He was talking about a 7 Jedi movie in the Star Wars universe. Think about that, right? A 7 Jedi movie in the Star Wars universe. Imagine what Snyder could have done with that. And they rejected it. This is how unambitious these people are. The idea of making Star Wars movie based on Akira Kurosawa's 7 Samurai almost seems circular. That movie, which has been remade and reimagined dozens of times over as everything from the 1960 Western The Magnificent Seven to Pixar's A Bug Life, was a major influence on George Lucas. But the pitch which eventually made its way to Lucasfilm was never developed for many reasons. One being Disney's acquisition of Lucasfilm in 2012 and that brass approach to the franchise. So, this is interesting. Did he pitch it to George Lucas? Did George Lucas say, I'm selling it, we can't do anything with you? Did he green light it and then they cancelled it? That's something officially that Zack won't even tell us. So that's a very interesting situation, considering what it was inspired by. You know, the original thing that, you know, inspired George as well. I think George would have loved the hell out of this movie, this idea, this pitch. The theatrical Star Wars movies have largely revolved around legacy characters, but Snyder's plan involved an entirely fresh cast with no relationship to past Star Wars protagonists. Now, this is very, very interesting. That's what I'm talking about. A remodernizing of Star Wars. We've told you the Skywalker saga. Don't drag out the Skywalker saga. Do something new. And Zack was looking to do that. This is the way to go. I think this would have been big. The problem Snyder's got, people still haven't forgiven him for Watchmen. This is why he gets the hate for the DCEU. Not because his Snyderverse is bad, because people will never let go of a certain ending of Watchmen, right? That's it. People have got long memories. I loved Watchmen because I never read the graphic novels. I get that. But this sounds awesome. I think this would have taken Star Wars to a revolutionary state. To past Star Wars protagonists. When Lucasfilm's plan for the sequel trilogy fell into place, Snyder's movie disappeared from any future planning boards. But that may be for the better. So it's clear this was originally greenlit by George Lucas before he sold to Disney. Very, very interesting. I never wanted to be the Star Wars movie because your hands are tied to the IP, Deborah Snyder said at the event. She's a long-time producer of her husband's movies. I was happy it fell apart. Wow! She's sitting there next to her husband, who clearly wanted to pitch this as a Star Wars movie, but she didn't. So I like the fact how independent she is and how she can say this in front of Zack as well. I've got a lot of time for Deb Snyder. Very, very smart, classy lady. So, yes, so she was happy it fell apart. Debbie said, thank God you would have been so sad, Zack recalled. So sad, Zack recalled Snyder continued to stew on his story. Now, this is interesting. Now, when they think about what they went through with WB and the Snyderverse and the DCEU, of course, they would have done exactly, look, Kennedy and Disney would have done exactly the same thing to Zack as WB did. Even worse. And he would have lost his story. Luckily, we got 3 DCEU movies, but he lost the entirety, the rest of his story. And that's always going to be a tragedy to us who appreciate him and his vision. But this ended up at Netflix. Netflix are saying, do what you want. Originally, he wanted to make this a 4-hour movie with no sequels. They said people won't sit there for 4 hours. Do 2 hours a piece. And I think Netflix will write about that. Not that I wouldn't have watched the shit out of a 4-hour Rebel Moon movie. I think one day he'll put it all together. Now, he's making 2 movies, by the way. We don't know about a third, but, you know, they've already announced the second movie. So there's certainly 4 hours here. And if people watch this and embrace this, and I can't see why they wouldn't, I think there'll be more. He's planning games, animation. It's going to be great. Anyway, Debbie said, thank God you would have been so sad. Zack recalled Snyder continued to stew on his story, which he says he actually thought up in a film school pitch class back in the 80s. After Snyder's fruitful collaboration with Netflix on the zombie movie Army of the Dead and its prequel Army of Thieves, Snyder decided it was time to develop his old Star Wars idea into an original adventure for the streamer. That Tuesday, far away from the picket lines outside of Netflix, reporters gathered inside the private theatre of a nearly $10 million home to get a first look at the trailer for Snyder's new epic, which is meant to be a 2-part movie project that will also expand into a massive video game. It was a universe of Rebel Moon trailer for both parts that made it clear that Snyder is going bigger than he's ever gone before. Even his 4-hour version of Justice League pales into comparison. Long gone are the days of developing a DC galactic showdown between gods among men. Snyder is attempting to create, in his own words, a new universe. That phrasing feels pointed and the marketing plan feels direct. Zack Snyder wants to kickstart a post-Star Wars era for big screen space opera. Now, this is very, very interesting because, you know, I think this is the biggest thing that Netflix have ever done. Ever. I think this is the most ambitious project. And to put so much faith in him, especially with his history, I think is amazing for them, especially in this day and age when streaming is in a lot of trouble financially and people are withdrawing the subscriptions. They're creating a franchise. They're creating a new IP, and it's very ambitious. Will it work out? I really hope, for Zack's sake, it does. 2 key events converge in 2017 to make this project happen. Snyder's firing from Justice League and the fervent vitriolic fan reaction to Rian Johnson's risk-embracing Star Wars The Last Jedi. Vitriolic, right? You know, you don't stop, do you? It wasn't vitriolic, right? People had a right to give their opinions. But this is the problem. I said this just earlier on Twitter. The problem with Access Media talking about entertainment, they have connections to the industry. And until we've got journalists who have an independent brain, this is the shit we're going to get. And the fervent vitriolic fan reaction to Rian Johnson's risk-embracing Star Wars The Last Jedi wasn't risky. It was an ambitious artistic thing. It was full of identity politics. It was full of extremism. And it was a mid-underwhelming movie that looked pretty good. After DC's separation from Snyder, the company flailed through different philosophical approaches to its cinematic universe. What are you talking about? Philosophical. they brought Johnson Berg in to recycle what Snyder did. You know, we've just seen what Hamada was planning, a disaster. And you're calling that a philosophy? You're a fucking joke. Anyway, approaches to its cinematic universe. Alternatively, promising a more cohesive MCU-style single storyline, and with the success of 2019's Joker, more standalone movies taking place in their own universe. I mean, this is just funny. I mean, this journalist just doesn't want to speak out of turn, does he, against Disney or WB? An MCU-style cohesive plan. Well, where's the cohesion? We don't know what universe it's set in. He's confusing people, James Gunn. It's a joke. But never mind, we continue. In their own universes. Meanwhile, Star Wars movies kept failing either at the box office or with critics and fans. The time seems right for more movies that don't come with the weight of all that IP. It's not the weight of the IP. That's the problem with Star Wars. It's the execution and what they're doing with it. It is not Star Wars. That's why it's failing. But Zack Snyder won't do it like they're doing it. He will make it epic, great to look at. And this is what Christopher Nolan spoke about as well. You can't just take the wonder and the vision that you see on the screen away from Star Wars. And there's not great storytelling in Disney Star Wars either. Zack Snyder has a great opportunity to expose Kathleen Kennedy. She rejected Rebel Moon. If this is a success and more successful than Star Wars, Disney Star Wars, and this becomes a big thing and overtakes Disney Star Wars, oh boy, surely at long last, Kennedy should be fired. Anyway, meanwhile, Star Wars movies kept failing either at box office, like The Creator, an upcoming original sci-fi movie from Rogue One, a Star Wars story director, Gareth Edwards. Blink and you might confuse frames from the Creator trailer for those in the galaxy far, far away. I hadn't really thought about that, Snyder said, about the connection between Rebel Moon and The Creator, two original sci-fi worlds from filmmakers with vested interest in Star Wars. By the way, Gareth Edwards is a very good friend of mine. He's a lovely man, and they interfered with Rogue One, and basically they brought in the other guy, the Fixer, to change it. Now, Rogue One ended up okay, made $1 billion, but Gareth Edwards was treated disgustingly on Star Wars. So two directors here they're talking about in Snyder and Edwards that were treated badly by corporate studios and now are starting their own universes. I wish Gareth as much luck as I do Zack Snyder. Anyway, it's kind of what Debbie said about struggling and being hitched to IP you don't really control. That's the problem with IPs, they belong to them. This belongs to Zack Snyder, and Netflix is coming along as the distributor. The difficulties associated with pushing a vision through that is controversial. Edwards reportedly faced a great deal of studio interference on Rogue One. I do know the details of this. This is very, very true. It's not something I'm going to divulge because it was said to me in confidence, but he was treated disgustingly. Much like Snyder faced with the multiple cuts of Batman vs Superman, Dawn of Justice and Justice League, but Snyder's story is more extensive and complicated with competing stories about why and when he departed Justice League, followed by a dramatic return to finish his final cut. There's only one story, my friend. The way he was treated, we all know the story. It was the studio's fault, not the fans, not Zack's, not Deb's. It was on them. They should have allowed him to finish his fantastic opus, and he would have given them a window in a Flashpoint story to start again. And now they've done it the wrong way, and they're fucked. Anyway, I can't believe we got Justice League made, Deborah said. Nobody can. Zack answered, but his cut of the movie ends with the promise of a grand battle that will never come. So far, Snyder's hopes of creating a generation-defining franchise are still unfulfilled. Is Rebel Moon that franchise? The lead up to the film has seemed like he wants to have his IP cake and eat it. 2. The trailer and the press images released for the film openly invoke Star Wars, weaponizing Star Wars language and iconography while emphasizing that this story never would have worked in Star Wars form. Right, first of all, it could have been a very pioneering future for Star Wars. It could have absolutely worked. This is not like Star Wars. This is not copying Star Wars because Star Wars itself was inspired by other great storytellers. Are you saying that George Lucas copied? No. This is inspired by Star Wars. It was meant to be a Star Wars story. Let's get that right. This is a culmination of all that we've done with storytelling, franchise telling, world building, said producer Wesley Collar, who has collaborated on Snyder's projects all the way back to his days of shooting commercials. He has a way bigger universe in mind, even beyond the first two films. Newman explained, world creation is a really hard thing. There are a very small handful of filmmakers who can pull it off. More on this movie than others. I did more drawing, Snyder revealed, explaining that he'd produced somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000 pieces of art for the franchise over the span of 4 or 5 months. The tone of the preview event frequently tipped in one direction. Rebel Moon is a rebuff of many things that have gone right and many things that have gone wrong in Snyder's career. Star Wars is the holy grail of many filmmakers who grew up in the 70s and 80s. But with Disney taking that franchise in its own direction, fucking hell, the way they mince their words, Snyder is ready for something of his own. The need for original streaming content led to the release of his definitive Justice League. Now, he isn't wholly invested in traditional cinematic experience for Rebel Moon. With this, I was not super interested in a theatrical release, especially with the PG-13 versus extended cut, Snyder said. I feel like with the theatrical release, the way the model is, it takes some energy out of it. Yes, because you've got to cut the film down, mainly because of what the studios want. But Zack's about really putting as much onto the screen as possible, and condensing his vision isn't a good idea. This is what happened with BVS. They condensed his vision by half an hour, so the movie didn't make sense to a lot of people. It did to me. And that's why the critics went for it. I think partially as well. If you're going to get Zack Snyder or Nolan on people like this, you know, or Denis Villeneuve, you've got to let them do their thing. If that's not your intention, and all you're interested in is $1 billion box office, right, then don't involve these people. Don't waste your time, and don't waste theirs. Both parts of Rebel Moon are getting R-rated extended cuts, wow, which will be more than 30 minutes longer than the films, but he didn't have to fight anyone to get those cuts made. My big fans would say, why are they fucking with you? Just do the extended cuts, he laughed. In the initial conversations with Netflix, they made it a part of the plan. Control is the theme of Snyder's career. I can't help myself, he admitted. I was always inspired by movies like Brazil. There's a great history of director's cuts. It's like another movie to discover. There's this other tug, rabbit holes. It's amazing for me with my drawings. There ends up being a lot of that to tell a deeper dive story with director's cuts I've done in the past. In a vacuum, it's how the movie would exist. It's part of my relationship with fans. It's a subtextual, or at least unclear though, whether Snyder has actually had to compromise with Rebel Moon. His original script was 172 pages long, and the Netflix film chairman Scott Stuber balked at a potential 3-hour runtime. Instead of whittling the story down to a Netflix preferred 2 hours, Snyder decided to split it in two. So his vision has not been compromised. You will see the entire story and vision in 2 movies, but you will see a 2-hour movie and another 2-hour movie. Personally, right, I would have watched it, I would have gobbled this up in 4 hours. But here's the truth. Justice League was watched a lot on HBO Max, but it was watched in blocks by people. And I think 4 hours is a lot for people to sit down. And I think that was kind of why the views of the Snyder Cut were kind of confusing, and people were saying people stopped watching it, blah, blah, blah. People didn't stop watching it. They watched it in chapters. The idea was to release the Snyder Cut chapterized. That's what they should have done in the first place. When he spoke about designing the films for a streaming audience, he sounded a lot like Ghosted director Dexter Fletcher, talking about an opening sequence he had for the fear that Apple TV Plus watchers would become bored after a few minutes without action and turn the movie off. And this is what I'm talking about. We have become accustomed to fast pacing and great visuals. And what we're doing, we're losing the art of actually seeing some interesting dialogue and some character development. And mainstream younger audiences don't want to see too much dialogue. That's a shame. What was it that idiot boxer spoke about Oppenheimer? He walked out in the middle of the film because there was too much talking. There lies the problem we have today. When you come out of the gate in a streaming movie, you have to be careful not to be too intense or too boring. Snyder explained, I always was a huge advocate of having the opening of a movie come at you hard, so am I. I think it makes you better. But the big question remains, will it all work? Will Zack Snyder shepherd the next Star Wars into this world via Netflix during the explosion of social media and the democratization, a corporate favourite word, of access to art and platforms to talk about art? Viewers' relationships with movies have fundamentally changed. There may never be another Star Wars simply because it's impossible to recreate such a phenomenon in today's cinematic ecosystem. And with the cloud of secrecy that streamers place over true viewership numbers, a point of clear and essential debate in both ongoing WGA and SAG-AFTRA strikes relating to a number of issues such as residuals, it may be impossible to tell whether Rebel Moon finds grand success. Is that why Snyder and company are de-emphasizing the idea of a theatrical release? Here's the thing, let me tell you how you're going to know if this is successful. You don't need to know the numbers. You'll get more and more games, you'll get more and more movies, you'll get TV spin-offs and all of that. Netflix will go full on. Basically, if it's not successful, you just get these two movies. That's how you're going to know it's successful. Lots of people bitching and Netflix are cancelling so much. At the beginning, when everything was at its peak at Netflix, I used to make fun of them. They just don't cancel anything. They do now. And people are trying to attack them with Rotten Tomato scores. You can't run a business on Rotten Tomato scores. A site and a place that's corrupted by critics and fan voting. We know that already. So if Netflix cancels something, it's because not enough people are watching it. That's the old-fashioned way of doing things. That's the way you equate success. If you don't have enough money in your till, you have to shut your shop. It's as simple as that. Unless you're James Cameron, the history of original galactic scale sci-fi at the box office isn't pretty. For now, however, the Rebel Moon machine is running full steam ahead. Reportedly, the real Rebel Moon isn't the moon in either part 1 or part 2. It's something that would emerge in a proposed third film or even a project beyond that. That's interesting. I've heard that muted before. If I ended up having to make a few more Rebel Moon, I'd be fine with that, he said. Whether he gets there will solidify the story of Snyder's career and could help resolve where Hollywood, an epic scale space opera that isn't full of droids and Wookiees, stands in this new age. Rebel Moon Part 1, Child of Fire, is scheduled for release on Netflix on December the 22nd, with Part 2, The Scargiver, scheduled for April the 19th, 2024. So I really wanted to read that out to you because I think it was very interesting. And because I'm not very good at memorizing trailers when I see them and I don't do shot by shots, I really wanted to get into this trailer and I really want to cover this film because I'm really excited for this film. I'm even more excited for this film now I've seen that first teaser trailer. Zack Snyder is a genius, he's a visual genius. If you like his style of movie making, you're going to love this. We know once this movie's out, the haters are going to come out, but just go on Netflix, enjoy the movie, and if lots of people watch this and have interest in this, there will be more. This is going to be very interesting. Here's the truth. This is a Zack Snyder movie. This is going to do what all Zack Snyder movies do. If you like that, great. If you don't watch it. Oh my God! I can't continue this video. I can't get it out of my head. It's just saying that WB, Warner Brothers Discovery, have said a horrible excuse for Blue Beetle flopping. Do you want to know what it is? I can't. So WB have said the tropical storm that happened last weekend is the reason that Blue Beetle flopped in its opening weekend. You fucking bullshit liars. Don't you have any shame? You projected this film for only a 30 million domestic. It came in even lower, 5 million lower, right? So if you projected it for 30 million and you certainly didn't know that tropical storm was coming, please don't tell me you made the projection because of the tropical storm. You fucking liars. You knew this film was coming in low. This is a mid-film. It stereotypes the Latino community. For example, are we saying that Latinos only like eating tacos? Isn't that very stereotypical? This film is racist and stereotypical to white people, and it is to Latinos, which is shocking because Latino people made this movie. But there's a difference between the Latino people who are my friends in their droves, and I know their mothers and their sisters and their brothers. And I know they don't just eat tacos. They love McDonald's, they love KFC. But of course, if you're a political extremist, you can't have Latinos in a film eating KFC and McDonald's. But I just thought I'd let you know the fucking joke of an excuse WB are using for this movie being a flop. It's a flop just like the other movies because you took away a grandiose, epic vision and replaced it with absolutely nothing. See you again soon. Peace.